Jimmy Pacquiao walked quietly into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, holding a small traffic ticket in his hand. It wasn't a serious case, just a minor violation involving a misunderstanding over a parking restriction. Still, he looked slightly nervous as he approached the podium. His posture was respectful, and he kept his eyes lowered, as if not wanting to draw attention to himself. What made the moment even more interesting was that nobody in the courtroom knew who he was. To everyone there, he was simply another young man dealing with a routine issue. Jimmy didn't act important, didn't try to stand out, and didn't show even the slightest hint that he came from a world-famous family. Instead, he carried himself with quiet politeness. Judge Frank Caprio, known for his warm personality and ability to put people at ease, greeted him with a genuine smile. "Good morning, sir," he said in his familiar gentle tone. "Let's take a look at what brings you in today." Jimmy nodded respectfully and responded with a soft, "Good morning, Your Honor." There was nothing unusual so far. Just another case, another ticket, another respectful young person standing before the judge. But there was something calm and steady about Jimmy's presence, something that gave off sincerity and humility. Even before he said anything meaningful, the courtroom audience watched quietly, unaware of what was about to unfold. Judge Caprio began reviewing the details of the violation, asking simple questions as he always did. Jimmy answered politely, never raising his voice or showing frustration. Everything seemed ordinary. But the truth was, this moment was anything but ordinary. Because in just a few minutes, Judge Frank Caprio would discover something unexpected, something that would shift the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. A revelation was coming. One that would cause whispers, widen eyes, and bring complete silence across the room. Judge Caprio began the hearing as he normally would, with a simple question about the citation. He held the ticket in his hands and asked, "So, young man, tell me what happened here?" Jimmy spoke calmly. He explained that he had parked in a restricted zone without realizing the sign applied during specific hours. There was no irritation in his voice, only honesty. "I wasn't paying enough attention to the time, Your Honor," he said. "Once I understood the rule, I felt responsible for clearing it up." Judge Caprio watched him closely. Many people came into the courtroom defensive or frustrated, but Jimmy's tone was different. There was sincerity, humility, and a quiet sense of responsibility. "You seem very respectful," the judge remarked. "Not everyone your age speaks with this level of courtesy." Jimmy lowered his eyes slightly. "I try my best, sir." That small answer made the judge curious. It wasn't forced. It wasn't an attempt to avoid the fine. It felt genuine. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Where are you from?" Jimmy answered simply and with the same calmness. As he spoke about living away from the spotlight and wanting to be more independent, the judge took notice. There was something grounded about him, something uncommon in a world where ego often overshadowed character. The judge continued with standard questions, and Jimmy continued with sincere answers. Every response reflected maturity and respect. Observers in the courtroom began paying closer attention, though they still had no idea who he really was. Judge Caprio, always intrigued by good character, paused for a moment. "I meet a lot of people here," he told Jimmy, "but every now and then, someone stands out because of how they carry themselves. You remind me of that." Jimmy simply nodded with appreciation. "Thank you, Your Honor." The conversation continued, still formal, still ordinary on the surface, but something deeper was forming. There was a natural connection building between the judge's wisdom and the young man's humility. Engagement break. Have you ever met someone who impressed you with just their humility? Comment yes if you believe respect always wins. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, studying the young man in front of him. There was a quality in Jimuel's demeanor that felt familiar, something that reminded the judge of people who were taught strong values at a young age. He began asking more personal questions, as he sometimes did when trying to understand a person fully. "Tell me about yourself," he said softly. "What do you do? What are your plans?" Jimuel seemed slightly hesitant, not because he wanted to hide anything, but because he never wanted to come across as boastful. Still, with honesty, he answered. He spoke about growing up in a family known around the world. He mentioned that his upbringing wasn't always easy, despite the fame attached to his last name. He explained that being Manny Pacquiao's son came with expectations, assumptions, and pressure. People often believed his life was perfect, but he emphasized that his family always pushed him to stay grounded, work hard, and respect everyone, no matter their status. I learned early on. Jimuel said, that respect is something you give because of who you are, not because of who someone else is. Judge Caprio listened attentively. The courtroom, usually filled with chatter and shifting bodies, had grown unusually still. People began connecting emotionally with the young man's words. Jimuel continued, sharing how he wanted to build his own path. He didn't want to depend on fame or his father's accomplishments. Instead, he wanted to prove his character, his discipline, and his determination. He spoke about watching his father rise from a life of poverty, how Manny Pacquiao fought not only in the ring but in life. Jimuel admired that journey deeply and wanted to honor it by being a good person, not just a well-known name god as he talked. The audience realized something important. Jimuel's humility wasn't an act. It was who he truly was. Judge Caprio, sensing the sincerity, asked gently, "It must have been challenging to grow up with such a legendary father." Jimuel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. But my parents always reminded us that fame fades and success comes and goes. What matters is how you treat people." The judge smiled softly. He had met people from all backgrounds, rich, poor, famous, unknown. Yet this young man's humility touched him deeply. There was something refreshing about someone who could easily rely on wealth and reputation, but chose instead to lean on character and respect. The courtroom felt emotional, almost tender. People weren't looking at the son of a world champion. They were looking at a kind, grounded young man who understood life better than many adults. Judge Caprio continued asking questions, still unaware of the full truth. But then, something in Jimuel's responses caught his attention. Perhaps it was the mention of boxing. Or maybe the values sounded too familiar. Finally, the judge raised an eyebrow. "Wait," he said slowly. "You mentioned your father earlier. May I ask, are you related to Manny Pacquiao?" There was a subtle shift in the room. A few people leaned forward, sensing something. Jimuel gave a shy smile and nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, he's my father." The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed softly. Whispers spread across the courtroom like a quiet ripple. "That's Manny Pacquiao's son. No way? That's him?" He looked so humble. But Jimuel didn't change. He didn't straighten his back with pride or look around for validation. Instead, he kept his eyes lowered, almost embarrassed by the attention. Judge Caprio sat back, surprised but impressed. "Well," he said, "I certainly wasn't expecting that." He looked closely at Jimuel again, not as a celebrity's son, but as the same respectful young man who walked in earlier. "You know," the judge said, "most people might mention that right away. They might expect special treatment." Jimuel shook his head. "I don't want that, Your Honor. I want to be responsible for my actions like anyone else." That simple sentence struck the judge deeply. It carried weight, real weight. And the courtroom felt it too. Respect grew even stronger. Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward, fully engaged now. The revelation of Jimuel's identity didn't make the judge see him differently, if anything. It helped him understand why this young man carried himself with such remarkable discipline and humility. Your father, Judge Caprio began thoughtfully, is one of the greatest athletes the world has ever seen. But more than that, he's someone who rose from very difficult circumstances. Jimuel nodded softly. He knew his father's story better than anyone, but he never used it to elevate himself. The judge continued, his voice warm. I remember watching Manny Pacquiao when he was still new to the boxing world. He fought with a heart that was bigger than any challenge placed before him. The courtroom remained silent, hanging on every word. Then Judge Caprio shifted the conversation toward Jimuel. But what impresses me today isn't your father's fame, it's your demeanor. Your father worked his way up from the hardships of childhood to global respect. And I can see that same humility in you. Jimuel lowered his gaze, touched by the compliment. Thank you, Your Honor. My parents always taught us to stay grounded, no matter how big the world becomes around us. The judge nodded with approval. And they taught you well. The atmosphere became emotional as Judge Caprio shared a personal story of his own. He spoke about growing up in a working-class family, about how his parents taught him that character mattered more than anything else. He recalled moments when respect and kindness opened more doors than strength or status ever could. He said quietly, My father once told me, you will never regret being kind, but you will regret every moment you weren't. Those words struck the room deeply. Even the audience members who came expecting simple court entertainment found themselves unexpectedly moved. Judge Caprio looked at Jimuel and said, Your father has achieved many great things in life. But today, I believe he would be proud of you, not because of who he is, but because of who you are. Jimuel felt his chest tighten with emotion. I appreciate that, Your Honor, truly. The courtroom energy shifted into something heartfelt and powerful. Viewers in the gallery wiped away tears. Some whispered to each other in awe. It wasn't a celebrity moment. It wasn't about boxing, fame, or wealth. It was about two men from different generations, one young, one wise, sharing an understanding built on values, family, and humanity. After a long pause, Judge Caprio returned to the matter at hand, the case itself. He picked up the ticket again, looked it over, and then set it gently on the bench. Well, Mr. Pacquiao, he said kindly, I've listened carefully to your explanation. You made a mistake, but you came here with honesty and respect. And that means something to me. Jimuel nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Caprio continued, his voice firm yet fatherly. My job is not just to hand out penalties. It is also to recognize sincerity and to encourage good character when I see it. The courtroom leaned in. It was clear the judge had made his decision. I'm going to dismiss this ticket, he said. Not because of who your father is, but because of the responsibility and maturity you've shown today. If more young people carried themselves the way you do, this world would be a better place. Jimuel's eyes softened with gratitude. I really appreciate that, sir. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He raised his hand gently, signaling he had something more important to say. I hope, he said, that you continue to follow the path of humility. Fame can disappear. Success can fade. But a good heart lasts a lifetime. His words resonated throughout the courtroom. People nodded, touched by the judge's wisdom. Jimuel bowed his head respectfully. I'll remember that, Your Honor. The judge smiled. Good. You have a bright future, not because of your father's name, but because of your character. Don't ever lose that. With that, the case was officially closed. But everyone in the room knew the impact of the moment would last much longer than the outcome of a ticket. Jimuel stepped back from the podium and, with genuine gratitude, added one last thing. Thank you for treating me like anyone else. Always, Judge Caprio replied. That is how justice should be. The moment the courtroom footage was uploaded online, it took no time for the world to react. Within hours, the clip began spreading rapidly across social media platforms. But what surprised everyone wasn't the fact that the young man in the video was Manny Pacquiao's son. It was the humility he displayed and the wisdom Judge Caprio offered in return. Comments flooded in. Wow! This is what respect looks like. That young man is raised right. Judge Caprio always brings out the best in people. The clip resonated globally not because of fame, but because of authenticity. People from different countries and cultures found something inspiring in the exchange. Here was a young man who could have walked into that courtroom expecting privilege, but instead, he walked in with humility. And here was a seasoned judge who saw past the name and focused on the character. The internet celebrated the moment as an example of how values can bridge generations. One viewer wrote, "This is the kind of content we need more of, real people, real respect." News channels and motivational pages began sharing the clip as well. They highlighted how Jimmy spoke about responsibility, how he didn't ask for special treatment, and how Judge Caprio reminded the world that kindness and humility are powerful traits. The video didn't just showcase a celebrity's son, it showcased a young man stepping into adulthood with dignity. And it showcased a judge who reminded us that justice is not only about rules but also about humanity. People who watched the clip felt something meaningful. The interaction made them reflect on their own lives, their own choices, and the values they carried. Many found themselves thinking about their parents, their role models, and the lessons they hoped to pass on to their own children. In the end, the story wasn't about boxing, fame, or the courtroom itself. It was about character. Final call to action. If you believe true greatness comes from humility, type humble in the comments and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this.